Hello, welcome to Fireside with Peter Adkison on Gen Con TV. On this show, we go in search of the untold stories behind your favorite games. And this season, we have teamed up with the Dungeon Masters Guild, who has been introducing me to all sorts of new voices in Dungeons and Dragons. And today's new voice is Sadie Lowry. Sadie has worked, well, first of all, she's a professional book editor in her real job, and she has written a bunch of D&D books, Darkhold, Secrets of the Zhentarim, The Adventurer's Domestic Handbook, and the recent smash hit, Eyes Unclouded. Yes,
Yeah.
so yay, Sadie. Thank you for being with us.
Hello, thank you for having me. I am so excited to be here.
Well, I'm excited to have you be here too. So what's your impression of the show so far overall?
Overall, you have had so many wonderful people on here with so many insights. I spent this week doing my homework, watching the interviews that came before this, and there's just a gold mine here of insight, wisdom, fun. It's such a great series, honestly.
Oh, thank you. Well, for me, it's been so much fun just to talk to people who are working on D&D now, as opposed to I was interviewing a bunch of people that I worked with back in the '90s, and so yeah. So welcome. This is going to be great. We're gonna have a great time. So what I like to do to start off with, Sadie, is get a little bit of information for our audience about who is Sadie Lowry. So where did you grow up? Where are you from?
I am from one of the suburbs off of Seattle, Kirkland. I was born in Washington and I was raised in Kirkland. I went to Robert Frost Elementary.
Okay, you are a
Yeah,
local.
yeah, yeah. I
Yeah.
currently live in Utah, but I tell you, someday I will go back. I miss Washington so much.
Now, were you raised in a gaming family? Did you have fond memories of a child playing games?
Yes.
Like like
um,
what sort of games did you play as a child?
so my mother, so I have three siblings, so it was always very family community games like Mario Kart, Mario Party. One of my earliest memories is my mother getting Mario 64 and watching us play and then being determined to get 120 stars before we did. So she would wait until we would go to school and then we'd come home and she'd be with like, I have 80 stars today. We'd be like, Mom, you're
So
cheating.
were you playing on like what were
Nintendo
you?
64.
And then, oh wow,
Yeah.
it's so funny. Okay, I gotta say, I asked this question to everybody that comes on, and you're the first person whose early childhood memories of playing games with the family have been computer games or video games, right?
Yeah.
Usually it's
Hmm.
Monopoly or something horrible like that. But that's fantastic. So you had three siblings, you grew up playing video games,
Hmm.
and
Fell in love with Legend of Zelda super early. I remember Ocarina of Time. That was like mind blowing to
right.
young Sadie.
Wow, that's great. So when did you get into role-playing games?
Gosh, I guess it depends on how we're defining role playing games. I fell in love with RPG, like role playing video games early. Yes, Majora's Mask 2. Yes, that was a
Okay.
good one. But yeah,
Okay.
I fell into video games really early. So as I transitioned from high school to college, I was sort of realizing that my favorite video games were Dragon Age and Mass Effect and the really story driven ones.
Okay.
I could sort of take or leave Call of Duty or
Right. Right.
Super Smash
Right.
Bros. But if you sat me down with Mass Effect, I was hooked. And so I for as nerdy as I was, I really it's odd to me that my spheres didn't really interact. That TTRPGs and RPGs for me didn't cross over until college because I grew up in such a nerdy family.
Wow.
Um,
Okay.
yeah,
So not
but
so this is interesting for me. Like of course I grew up before video games. I mean there was early video games. I'm not that old, but I mean, we had Pong and by the '70s, and we were getting interesting Commodore 64 games and stuff by the '80s. And so um but the idea of a role-playing game for so long was our thing. It was a tabletop RPG thing. And
yeah.
then the video game industry co-opted the word, and it always kind of rankled me that that's
Oh
not a
no.
role-playing game. That's not, and so, but you grew up thinking role-playing games were video games,
Yeah.
and then later found out otherwise. So when did you find out about Sadie, on this show, when we say role-playing game, we mean ones played around a table with dice, or
With dice.
maybe on Twitch or
Uh-huh.
something. But I mean,
Okay.
so when did you find the heartland, the
When did I
the
come to
orthodoxy,
yes.
the
Uh
true RPG experience?
when did I come back to pure
Yeah,
RPG
it
TTRPGs?
doesn't sound like it was coming back to. It
Yeah,
was
you're
sounding
right.
more like
Coming to seeing the
finding.
light. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um so that would have been the latter half of college. I had a couple of friends who were talking about it around the time. One of my friends was really developing his Pokemon TTRPG, and I had no idea what he was talking about, but I was supportive. I was enthusiastic. And then a couple of other friends pulled me in and said, come try this game with us. Come play this game. And I remember being really confused at first, but
Where's the computer?
where's well, there was so many rules and numbers, and I was like, people do this for fun.
On
they
their
they
own. Like,
just they just do math
you
for
you could
fun.
you could track hit points without a
Yeah.
computer.
but then a friend was like, I want to do a long form campaign, and that's where it really started. He said, I want you, Chris. That's my husband, everyone. This is
Yeah.
Chris. uh,
Hey, Chris. Hi.
Hi, Chris.
Wave.
Um, but so he gathered up a bunch of people, and we started playing a long form campaign. And I think before that point, because I was doing one shots and random nights at college, I didn't realize that it could be very story driven. I was like,
Right.
okay, this is a
Right. Right.
weird funny table game like Monopoly, but it wasn't. It's he showed me how story driven it could be, and I went, this is what I've been looking for. This is the experience of Mass Effect or Dragon Age, but driven actually by me and by the people at the table. This is the cooperative storytelling, because I had been writing my entire life.
Right.
When
Right.
uh you know
And you're segueing nicely into one thing I wanted to talk about, was what I think of as the aha moment, like
mhm.
the moment of realization of what this form could be all about, what you couldn't get from those
Yeah,
wannabe fake so-called RPGs,
those fake video games,
those
those
fake
pixels.
those pixels. Yeah, what what your quest was really to find, right?
Exactly. Because I had been writing my whole life. I mean, back in elementary school and middle school, I started a series about Griffin riders because I thought dragon riders were overdone, and I was being cool and hipster by doing Griffin riders
Yeah,
instead,
I see that.
right?
Hmm.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
I mean, I had been writing since I was a child, but
I mean, once you get past Anne McCaffrey, I mean, it's all like, what do you do after that, right?
exactly. Like that was when Aragon was really big too, and it was like,
Right?
oh, please, do I look like Aragon
Yeah,
to you?
yeah, yeah.
Uh, but and so it was that aha moment. It was this very, oh my gosh, this is writing but with people that I love, and building a story with multiple people, which I just hadn't had that experience.
And
And
and and if I recall, you said you played some like one-offs and one-shots before that moment.
mhm.
Is that, I mean, I had a similar thing, Sadie, like where I played D&D for like 3 or 4 months, but I played it like a board game. Um,
Yeah.
and I was GMing. I didn't know what I was doing because I was in high school and there was just, nobody else played, and I was in a boarding school. And then I went and played at a guy's house who had a campaign that he created himself, like an honest to God, like homebrew campaign.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden I got it and like, wow, this game is amazing. I still think back to that
Yeah.
and like, how my worldview changed in this one moment.
Well, so my one of my first real D&D experiences was this. It was my roommate's boyfriend, and he was kind of a prankster, and he wanted to run a game for us. And I forget the details, but we spent
Yeah.
like 3 hours following this story, and the whole thing ended up being this like big gotcha puzzle. Like, oh, you couldn't figure out my prank on you this entire time. And it really
Yeah.
turned me off of tabletop games for a solid few months there. I was like, no, that wasn't fun at all, actually. Um, for me, it's always been about story and
Yeah. Yeah.
that long form experience. And so that's what made me like, oh my gosh, I have a home here. This is my
That's great.
home.
Oh my God, that's fantastic. So I'm guessing the next chapter then is you and Chris stay in touch and keep playing D&D and and
we
find some
we
other things to do along
yeah.
the way.
We get married. Yeah. He gives
Yeah,
me a very nerdy wedding proposal.
nice.
I'm pretty sure there was a Mass Effect quote in his wedding proposal.
Nice.
So, you know.
That's fantastic. So when did you start running your own games? Or I shouldn't assume that you do, but I do assume
Yeah,
that you do.
it's about 2 years ago. I had been in that game for about a year, and the gears were turning. I went, okay, we'd had this, an arc involving my character, and the gears started turning. I was like, I see what D&D can be, and I can do this. I've been
Right.
a storyteller my whole life. I can do this. And it was around the time, it was I say Critical Role's like peak popularity. That's not true. Critical Role, I feel like, just gets bigger and bigger and better and better. But it was a kind of a serendipitous joining of events, because I was getting interested in DMing. I was like, I really love this, and I think my friends would really love this. I was in an online writing community, and I was like, this is fun writing posts for each other, but we could do this real time. We could do this
Yeah.
live with each
Yeah.
other. And then my friends were getting really into Critical Role and going, okay, I think that this is something I could do. And so all of that just created this perfect scenario where I went to them and I went, I want to run a campaign. Can I run one for you? And they went, yeah, let's do it. And I mean, now we have a weekly Thursday game. Another player in there is running a bi-weekly game. Another one is creating a series of one shots. It's like we've created this little group of just like constant D&D. They're my go-to playtesting group. It's like, okay,
Right.
guys,
Right.
let's go. Make some characters. Chop chop.
So when you first started DMing, what was what did you find most gratifying and also most challenging about I hope you don't mind. I'm suddenly wanting to talk about your insights into
Yeah.
GMing and the game itself, and we'll get to your projects. But
Yeah, no. For me, I the hardest part for me is I want a world to make sense. And so having puzzles that make sense always really trips me up. I'm not the kind of person that can just put a door in there that has a code word on it and you need to say the word out loud and then the door opens. For me, the puzzles have to make sense. They have to have been something that someone would actually logically have put there to protect something. But that requires me to be very smart and diabolical, and I am not always very smart and diabolical. I can't think like a diabolical mastermind all the time. So that's my challenge, is good puzzles. I'm waiting for Tasha's because I'm like, please help me with puzzles.
well, Sadie, if that's the biggest challenge you got, my solution is I just don't bother with puzzles hardly at all. Like what's I mean, seriously, I mean it's almost flip. Once in a while, one will just come to me, but it'd be like once every 5 years or something, and then like, okay, that's a cool idea for a puzzle. I think I'm just gonna slide that in there,
Yeah.
and all my players don't know what to do because they're not expecting puzzles from me. But
That's right. You can really get them with that.
right,
It's when they
right.
least expect it. As
So
far
what do
as
you like about it, though? What
yeah,
do you,
most gratifying. I think it's um I love creating a world and a story and watching them not just dig their hands into it and get invested. I have said this on so many interviews, and I will repeat it until the day I die. I have some of the best players. They do not need coaxing to get invested in anything. You go, here's my scenario, and they go, okay, we're in. So I'm very lucky,
Right.
and
Yeah.
I feel very blessed to have them. But it's what's really gratifying to me is knowing them well enough and figuring out what they want out of a character arc and a story, and being able to provide that in ways that surprise them.
Right. Right.
That long game, I had a
Right.
plot point that I plotted for 2 years,
Right.
waiting to get to that reveal for that character, and when we got there, I mean, she was sobbing.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
gratifying for me, is that ability to know them and love them well enough to go, if
And
I've
and to
never
pull it
seen.
off, right? To pull it
Yeah,
off in a way that's subtle, but
yeah,
it's there, and that's
exactly.
yeah.
I've never really been a DM versus player, but the tricks
Yeah.
that I pull on
Yeah.
them are, how can I give you exactly what you were looking for
Yeah.
in a way that you didn't expect, or
Right.
in a way that totally knocks you off your feet. That thrills me, just having them go, I didn't see this coming, and this is exactly what I wanted, and you've really turned this story into something special. That's hands down the most gratifying part of DMing.
Laura in chat, I have to quote it, says, takeaway, Sadie delights making her players
That
cry.
is out of context.
Well, I think that's an overall impression, though.
Yeah, I do. My other favorite, I'll tell you, because I like you so much, Peter. My other favorite is
Oh,
sometimes, if it's really, my favorite is when they go, I need to stress pee, and I'm like, you need to stress pee, and they're like, yeah, I need a break. I need to stress pee. And so we'll pull off of a climactic
we're,
moment.
we're, we're gonna try and hit that point during this interview. One of us is gonna need to stress pee, and
All right,
Marcus
let's
is gonna have to pull out the little prop up picture, and
yeah,
okay, well, this is so much fun, but let's transition into your
yeah,
work, because we promised you we'd be able to talk about your work and promote your work, and stuff, and
might
I'm
as well
dying to
get
hear
there.
it, because I just got to say right off the bat, before we dive in, it looks like you have a bit of a dark streak, or is that just I mean, the first two projects, Darkness from the Stars and the Deathless Skies of isn't it Siri or
Sire.
Sire?
I'll go on
Uh,
that pronunciation until I die. I think it's
yeah,
sire.
Sire. Okay. I don't know. I'm just forecasting. There's a dark side to Sadie, I think, and making them cry. That's all coming together here. You look so happy and jubilant and sweet, and yeah. But watch out.
Yeah,
Okay, so
it's
tell us about Darkness from now. This is an Eberron adventure,
yeah,
right?
it's funny, when I told my friend that I was working on Darkhold, she went, you're working on Darkhold, and I was like, yeah, no, I'm gonna make a really like horrible cleric that like hates happiness, and she was like, you're going to make that, and I went, yeah, no, it'll be great. So yes, but yes, my first two adventures, A Darkness from the Stars and Deathless Skies of Sire. Chat, thank you, Sire. I I'm right. We can
Yeah,
debate
there's
this
a
all
raging
day.
debate. Everybody
I
agrees
know.
that it's Sire, not the other
I
one.
will personally
I
tell
won't even
Keith Baker he's wrong when I meet
yeah.
him.
I won't even honor it with an attempt at like how those other people pronounce it. Yeah.
Siri, Sears, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
But so Eberron lends itself really well to mystery and intrigue and horror and pulp noir. And
Sure.
so,
Sure.
and I always liked kind of the dark mystical side of things, which is where Darkness from the Stars came from. I love, anyone will tell you, I love stars, I love space. My journal, is it here? My journal is like star themed. I'm big into space. So when I read that there was an observatory, I knew I had
Okay.
to put a
Sadie brought a prop. It's her journal. It's a
wait,
Starfield.
hold
Good.
on. I have
Yeah.
more.
You have more. Okay.
I have, this is my moon. It lights up, except it's out of battery, so I can't light it up for you. But I'm telling you, I love space.
Okay, great. I used to work in aerospace, so it's all good.
You did. That's
Yeah, I worked at the
awesome.
boat. I worked in same crew that designed the Saturn V external tank.
What?
Yeah, yeah.
Are we? Should we have this interview about you? Should I
Y-
ask you questions?
No, this is about you, Sadie. I just throw once in a while. I throw in a little bit of Peter in there, just
Okay, that's
it's
so
my only
cool
chance.
though. Okay,
Yeah,
that's really cool.
yeah.
Um, but so I put an adventure in the observatory, and then the other one was, if I recall correctly, I went to Amber Litke and I said, I have an idea, and she went, okay, and I said, big airship battle, an adventure that culminates with a fight in the sky. And she went, great, let's do it. And so while the Deathless Skies of Sire is very creepy, and we tried to tie in some of the Mournland and the tragedy in the war, I admit that we made that purely for the very visceral happiness of, you are on an airship, you fight a sky leviathan. It's very cool.
Okay. So now, okay. We jump from Darkness from the Stars to a Skyless, or are these part of a series? Did I
No,
really
they're
get
just two
off
separate
track here?
adventures.
No, they're just both okay, and they're both Eberron, so that's the thing. By the way, I have an emotional attachment to Eberron because Eberron came from Keith Baker, a contest we had at Wizards of the Coast about where fans could send in an idea for a campaign setting, and we would publish it. And Keith Baker was the winner of that, and so I always thought that was a fantastic idea.
Yeah.
And let's see, we've got a question, minor question. Whenever you guys get around to it, when we get around, well, that's now. Okay, Sadie works a lot with Amber. How did that team up happen, and how does that process work for y'all?
Oh gosh. I mean, so
Tell me who Amber is, first of all.
Amber.
First of all, I thought maybe it was Amber, like the Nine Princes, and no,
No.
not
So
that.
Amber
No.
Litke is one of my best friends in the entire world.
Oh, I'm glad you have friends. Good. That's good.
I have, I like to think I have more than one, hopefully. I like
I'm
to.
sure you have many. That was very,
uh,
yeah.
yeah. So we met, she is an online friend of mine that I met, gosh, 3, 4, 5 years ago, in an online persona role-playing group. So as you can see, storytelling and we have a long history.
Okay. Yeah.
But it was
Good.
a persona role-playing group, and we just clicked very well. And so she and we've been storytelling together with a couple of other friends of ours, who I would say their name and praise them here. They're more private people, so they
Oh
know
yeah.
who they are, and they know that I love them and adore them so much. But so Amber was that the team up happened when the RPG Writers Workshop, I saw it advertised, and I went to Amber and I went, Amber, do this with me, sign up with me. And she went, what? And I was like, sign up with me, I want to write one. And so she is ever patient with me, and we both signed up for it. And she has a degree in game design, and so she was like, oh, okay, yeah, cool. And so we took my long storytelling history and her long game design and storytelling love, and we mashed it together, and we work on a lot of things now together.
Well,
Our
sure.
process, yeah, our process is very, I mean, we just know each other so well that I don't know that I can give insights that
No, that's
help
okay. I think
other people.
and you and I are just sort of quietly pretending that the overalls have now suddenly taken over the chat
We're
on
not looking at
Twitch.
that,
Yeah,
yeah.
we're uh
But
so yes, you were worried that this would happen,
I
and
know,
we
yeah.
will make our saving throws and press on. Okay, so I want to get back to the, the module
Yeah.
of Sire, and so you have this. I saw in the description, and you alluded to it that well, it says. Let me read right what it says from the party will face the eerie arcane wasteland that is a devastated Sire. Fight echoes of the last war, face an undead admiral and his airship crew, and face off against a monstrous undead leviathan in a thrilling airship escape and encounter. So I have a question, like if all the characters on an airship, I see this, there's like science fiction, this happens, it happens on ships, like if the vessel gets destroyed, the PCs are just like
Uh-huh.
screwed,
Yeah.
right? I
Yeah.
mean, like, how do you is it
So
possible the ship's gonna? Do you get Is this a TPK sort of possibility
it
here?
could be. So we tried to give a lot of flexibility in how how a DM wanted to run it. So the ship has a separate HP. Obviously, it has a stat block. The Leviathan has a stat block, and the crew can take actions to mend the ship each round to give it some of its hit points back. And I also have, I think, a note in there that says if a PC falls off an airship, you can catch them with a net or something. It doesn't have to be instant death. I think it's one of those scenarios where it wasn't hard to design how you could TPK them. That's very easy. The Leviathan smashes it and you die.
The really
It was
challenge is not TPK.
Yes.
Right.
So it was like we had, and we tried to separate it so you could either run it very smoothly or more crunchy. So we gave the Leviathan some extra appendages with their own health pools if you want, that the PCs have to kill before they can attack the main body. If you want to give the Leviathan more time to do its smashy stuff. So what we tried to do, and this was, I want to say, this was very risky and adventurous for our second thing we had ever published, but what we wanted to do was say, here are the tools to either run this as mercifully or as cruelly as you like. Have fun. I'm more of a
Right.
storytelling person, so I wouldn't have the Leviathan just smash the ship, but
Right.
there are
Sure.
DMs out there who they
Sure.
love that.
Well, you knock it around a bit,
Yeah.
shake
Oh
them up
yeah.
a little. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
increase the
Yeah.
tension. Make them feel
Uh,
it.
and so, backing up for a moment broadly. So, what was your role? Did you write on this with a
Mhm.
collaboration with a group of other writers, or was this mostly you, or what?
That was me and Amber. So,
You and Amber. Okay.
yep. So we both wrote it. We both wrote it together. We just went in and wrote bits and pieces, looked over and revised each other's sections. I did one of the cardinal sins. I wasn't really keyed into the community at that time, so I did the very cardinal sin of editing it myself. Which don't do that. Don't do that.
Mm,
Please get an outside editor. Everyone, don't edit your own work. And
yeah,
then
that's good advice.
yeah, Laura Herzbruder very graciously offered to make it a little bit more Eberron lore compliant. So we had her, she offered to go through that and help us help us smooth over some of the parts that we had gotten wrong. And then Amber did the layout in GM Binder. So it was
Right.
very much a two woman plus Laura team. uh, a two
Well, yeah,
woman
and
team plus
I
Laura helping us make it good.
I'm guessing that's the Laura that's on our chat. So,
Hmm. Yeah.
let's.
Hi, Laura. Thank
Hi,
you.
Laura. Thank you. Yes.
Uh-oh. Are we frozen? Am I frozen?
So we kind. I'm back. All right.
Peter, come back to us. The Leviathan got you. Peter, come back.
Oh my god. Ooh, yeah, well, it's sorry about that. Yeah, okay. So I was actually going to transition back to, we kind of skipped Darkness from the Stars. What can you
Yeah.
tell me about this? Because this looked interesting. There were mentions about astral dragons and
Yeah.
nightmares and stuff like that.
Yeah. So that was the idea, is that you go to the observatory and the researchers there are acting real weird. You realize that they are under some kind of mental submission, and you solve a puzzle and go down into the mountain. And I this one might not be as spot on with its Eberron lore. It did not have a Laura to smooth out some of the bumps, but the idea is you go through these mystical cave puzzles, you go down and you realize that there is a starry dragon there. And I kind of did that last fight so that you could either keep it just an astral dragon, which Eberron doesn't actually have a lot of dragons, so that
Hmm,
was my first mistake, but now it has a starry dragon and I will take credit for that.
there you go.
Uh, But the idea was you could run it in either one phase, and the dragon has like these cool gravity effects like that it does, where it'll ram you up on the ceiling, or it'll I can't remember what else it does, but I was getting real feisty with that fight. I was like, if we're gonna do space, we're gonna do space. We're gonna throw the lights out and yeet people onto the ceiling.
I hear that you like space.
I do, yeah. And so but then I did it so that you could also run sort of a phase 2 where a quarry would show up, and the
A
quarry
what? I
could
missed that. A what?
quarry, is that how you say it? Quarry, Quuri.
Hmm.
It's a monster in Eberron,
Okay, I'm not
and
familiar with it. Yeah.
it's related to the Dreaming Dark, which is this, I think it's
Right.
the prophecy that the quarry are going to try to come back to the plane. See, now you can tell that I did some research, but
Yes.
I did some research. Um, and so the idea was that you could either keep it a dragon and call it a day, or you could transition it into a quarry and then fight the quarry, and the quarry could try to possess you. And maybe it would allude to the Dreaming Dark, and you could tie that into a larger campaign and be like, oh, the Dreaming Dark is coming, because I wanted it to be workable into a larger campaign if you wanted to do that.
So the copy mentioned something about nightmares, characters having nightmares as they descend into this place.
Hmm.
Did you how did you tackle that sort of topic within D&D? Do you remember? Like, did
Gosh,
you
I'd
have
have to go look at my PDF. So
Oh,
what
I
I
didn't mean to
like
put
to
you on the
do,
spot. Don't
no, it's okay.
we can
The
back
way
up
that
here.
I tend to approach that
Yeah,
is
there you go.
I trust that DMs know their players. So it's a little harder in a one shot, and I admit that. But it's kind of if a DM knows their players well, I don't use I don't tend to try to use like madness mechanics or insanity mechanics. I like it when it's more personal and a little bit less insensitive. Uh
Mhm.
so it's very much nightmares of like a character's worst fears or something they're
Right.
ashamed of doing, their worst regrets. That's how I think that when I tested it, there was a character who I tempted to join the dragon side, and because I it was like he wanted power. He wanted power, and so I kind of tempted him with that power. And others, it was like their regrets, and that's how I tend to do that. Is I like to make it much more personal to the characters. When they're faced with things like that, like ask my players anytime. One of my favorite things to do is to make them fight versions of themselves that either have their flaws magnified, are more perfect versions of themselves, or
Oh my
or just
gosh.
make them like face things in themselves that they want to overcome. I love that stuff because
Wow.
it's helps
Wow.
people grow, and like it forces them to do that kind of character development. I eat that up.
Wow. Wow. That's fantastic. I'm reminded of an old Jack Chalker series where this character gets cloned, only it takes him a while to realize that he's the clone as opposed to the original.
Ooh,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
that
That's
sounds
like that's mind twisting. Yeah.
yeah, that sounds familiar, but I can't.
Yeah. I think other authors have run with that idea. I think
Yeah.
once the idea is out there, then
Oh yeah.
it's fair game. Right? So
Hmm.
Um, well, okay, so hey, let's move on to something maybe not quite as dark, but the Adventurer's Domestic
the, ex-
Handbook. Um,
the
well, and
exact opposite. Yeah.
yeah, and we had Lydia Van Hoy on our show here a while back,
Yeah.
and so we talked a little bit about that from her perspective. But for anybody who hasn't heard of this project, why don't you first of all kind of explain what the product, what the book's about?
Sure. So the Adventurers Domestic Handbook was our attempt to bring homesteading essentially to D&D, and kind of bring some of those softer aspects that like show up in my campaign so much. So it's rules for starting and running a business, rules for having a homestead and supporting that and having it like turn crops and have passive income for you. We have marriage ceremonies, like that we kind of flavored with different classes and various things. We have subclasses that are meant to be very cooperative and help each other, and kind of tie. Like I remember making a bard that the whole shindig was that they could inspire two people at once, and then those people could use their inspiration to help each other. And so you
Mm-hmm.
almost couldn't use it in like a wider sense, but you could use it to help each other. um and gosh, what else did we have? We had romanceable NPCs, for those who like dating sims. We had a lot of fun with those.
Okay, well there you go. Let's explore that a little bit. I mean, well, first of all, aren't all NPCs romanceable? I mean,
Yes.
yeah, I mean, but so what do you mean by a romanceable NPC, and
So
how
we
did you
had,
make that happen?
yeah, so we had two types of NPCs, like employees that you could drag and drop into your campaign, but also romanceable ones. And what we tried to do is sort of show a format by which you could create. What we really wanted to do was make it so that romancing an NPC was not a transactional system. Like you go play Dragon Age and it's like you hand Alistair roses until he loves you, right? And that's,
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
it's not very satisfying. And a lot of people, I think, that's when you come from video games into TTRPGs, it can be difficult to make that transition. And it's like, I will
by the way,
succeed. Mhm.
on this show, you can just say RPG, and we will know you mean
Well, no,
tabletop.
okay.
Yeah, yeah, we
Sounds
all
good.
know what RPG really means. Yeah,
That's
and
right. I
my
forgot.
audience,
Video games are all hacks and
yeah,
frauds.
my audience is well trained on this. Yeah,
That's right. Okay. So when you go from video games to RPGs,
yeah,
uh, you you know, it can be a little bit mechanical. Like if I
right.
succeed on a charisma check against this NPC 3 times, then but and we didn't want it to be that way. We
Right,
wanted it
right,
to be
right,
very
right,
realistic. So each
right.
one has they have things that increase their affection for you and things that decrease. Like we have their background, we have their personality, we have what they like and don't like, we have what their goals are, because we,
Mhm.
we don't want them to exist in a vacuum. We don't want them to just be
Sure.
standing there like, I don't exist until someone wants to kiss me. They're people and they want things, and if you support them, then they like you more. If you go against them, they don't like you anymore. And shocker.
No,
And so
yeah, I mean, it's I think that's interesting. I think romance in RPGs is a tricky topic, and
mhm.
you're certainly not the first person to try and work on it. Now I'm curious to actually buy this project and see how you solve some of these problems. There's
we
some-
yeah we have so we have basically a profile that we think people can emulate for any of their any
Right.
NPC that they want to create. But we have so many in there that we have like a what's the word. My favorite is this revolutionary, is that the word? She her village is being sort of uh overseen by a tyrannical figure, and so she's very hard to romance, and because she's so focused on freeing her village,
Right.
but you
Right.
can help her. But a lot of what we talk about in the beginning of the book is about consent and sort of talking about what's okay at your table.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
what does
That's good.
everyone want to see, what happens off screen versus on screen. Uh we're very aware that there's never going to be one thing that fits all tables.
Right.
And so the best, what we try to do is provide here's how we think you can make it non-transactional. Here's how you can build really fleshed out romance options.
Right.
But do
One thing I found out is it never goes as you plan as a GM. Like you,
yes.
I mean, I've had more success handling romance in RPGs since I came to the conclusion many years ago that I can't anticipate it. That I just have to be open to the signals. It could happen with any NPC. I should
Hmm.
not devise an NPC that this is the NPC that a certain PC at the table is really going to fall in love with. But no, for me and my jamming, it never worked that way, even though I do pride myself on being pretty good at this topic. But that was the golden rule.
Did never
Just
plan.
just never plan it, and then when it happens, then start backfilling like crazy to figure out, okay, how do I make this work, right?
Yeah.
By the way,
I
we
know
have
my
a
friends.
I just said Laura came in. Update from Keith regarding sire pronunciation. I maintain there is no wrong answer. Again, it's Missouri or Missouri. I'm filling in. I'm adding a little bit to his quote
So
there.
it's either Sire or Sura, is what we're saying.
No, you and I, Sadie, I'm on Team Sire with you because, well, you're my guest, and that just
Because you
seems
know I'm
rude.
right.
Yeah, and because you're right, because we're right. That's the other reason. Yeah, and Hey, before I forget, we had, if we can transition, we had
Yeah.
a couple of questions from chat ahead of time because we do this. We call out the chat and say,
Yeah.
so I have two questions queued up that were posted earlier this week on one of our social media forums somewhere. The first question comes from a nerdery on Twitter. What single adventure had the most impact on you for how you think about writing adventures?
What single adventure had the most impact on me? Wow. That's a question I should have prepped ahead of time. Wow. Okay.
It was in the document. I was in the
It
agenda.
was?
Yes, it
Oh,
was in
oh
there.
no. Okay.
It might have been added though earlier today. So
Oh, no.
I mean,
Okay.
my answer would be I honestly I never really read much adventures. I started homebrew from the beginning, and even though I've been playing D&D a long time, I have like common topics I can talk with people about, like all the editions of AD&D and a lot of the key books of AD&D. But when it comes to conversations go into specific adventures that are classic, like
Yeah.
the tomb, the elemental evil tomb or tome or whatever the hell it was. I see. I don't even remember the title of it. Like I didn't
So
run those. I didn't run those, and I was a GM, so I didn't play them either.
I'll give you a very different answer.
Yes,
I will
please.
tell you what's been inspiring me adventure-wise lately.
Okay, that's
And it's
good.
going to require a bit of an explanation. Is that okay?
Yes, please.
So I love the MMO Final Fantasy 14. And if anyone here plays it, we're homies. But it has three expansions at this point. I'm doubting myself on that. Yeah, it has the base game and then three expansions. And I think as far as an RPG, a fake RPG goes, because it's an MMO, as far as fake RPGs go, it is one of the best examples of really focusing the player, but in a way that feels a way that feels narratively satisfying because it builds on itself. So you start off as this random adventurer,
Okay.
and then you join the scions. You join like the scions, and you join this group, and they're dedicated to destroying these primals. And so you start to get a little bit more important, but you're not leading the scions, right?
Yep,
Someone else
yep.
is leading the scions, but you're a little more important now. People are starting to know who you are. And as you go through the expansions, they are varying degrees of good and not so good. Heaven's Word is really good. I don't personally like Stormblood very much, but Shadowbringers has been really informing my TTRPG thoughts lately in a lot of ways, because back in the base game in ARR, you have these like faceless villain nobodies they feel like the stock villain of the week, right? They're called the
Okay.
Asians.
Okay.
And spoiler warning, by the way, for anyone who wants to play Shadowbringers. I'm not going to shy away from spoilers because I think this is very cool to talk about.
Yeah. It's
But
fine.
so they're these faceless villain nobodies who just show up, and you fight them, and they have this vague take over the world plan, and you're like, okay, all right, baddie of the week, you're going to take over the world, and I'm going to stop you.
Yeah.
Shadowbringers not only develops the villains, it develops you alongside the villains, which I think is fascinating. You find out that the Asians basically broke their own world, and that they're trying to sacrifice your world essentially to rebuild theirs, which is a very tragic story. You
Oh,
start to know
yeah.
some of the Asians and who they were on that old world, and what they did, and why they want to do this. And meanwhile, it slowly develops a story about you that ultimately culminates, and this is very big spoilers, I'm sorry, but it ultimately culminates in you finding out that the Asians were once called Emiratines, and you find out that this fill-in MMO player, were also an Emiratine on the council, and you defected from them, and um, you are this broken shard from the convocation. You stood against them, and you became a champion of this one thing called Heidelin. And meanwhile, they were trying to raise
Mhm.
Zodiac back from the dead, and Heidelin and Zodiac have been fighting for ages. And by the time you get to Shadowbringers, I mean, at that point, you are the warrior of light. You're not just some scion anymore. You are the warrior of light. And then you go to this alternate world. You're the warrior of darkness in a world that is flooded with light. You are the most important person. And then you find out that you are so tragically tied out to these villains. And it makes me think that if one of the things that it manages to do is make you feel so important and so tied
Mhm.
into this world and its history, and so tied into the villains and everything around you. You are important. You go from this random adventurer doing fetch quests for people to this person who changed the entire fate of the world and who stood against people that you once loved. And if I can ever emulate that feeling
Yeah.
that I
Wow.
felt playing Shadowbringers, I will have reached peak RPG design. I will,
Ooh.
if I can
You're a
ever
charmer.
make
You are a charmer.
if I can ever make anyone feel that special and that
Yeah.
intrinsic to the world and its history, and that breathtaken by how deep that lore goes back, like that's mind blowing to me. And so it's big, and it's hard to accomplish in design because you never know what the DM or the players are going to do. You can't I don't
I,
want to go, but I don't want to go write a novel, right? I
right,
want to
right.
figure out
No.
that challenge of how do I give a DM the tools
Yeah.
to help a player feel like I felt playing Shadowbringers, where I was
Wow.
a sobbing mess by the end.
Oh, that, yeah, that's well, first of all, your answer is much better than mine. Very, very good.
No,
Very good. Yes.
no.
No, it was. I'll give you that one. And then the next contest is up for grabs, but you won that one.
Okay.
No, but I think Sadie, I think you touched on something that we as GMs and I think writers, this is something I think GMs and writers have in common when it comes to Dungeons and Dragons or any role playing game is we're we want to see that perfect moment. We want to see that
Yeah.
we aspire to something that is really grand, and there's almost a fear that comes with it that we can't get there. It'll be like,
Yeah.
it can really bring you down if you think about it too much.
Yeah.
You know.
It's how do you create that
Well,
how do you create that moment?
Sadie, you touched on it earlier. You said you're blessed with great players, and if your players suck, you can't get there. I mean, you can need great players
If
too.
you can get people who are invested and who
Yeah.
trust you, and if you trust them. So in my home game, one of my players was cursed with a blood curse, and she decided not to determine why. She said, "I." And this is an example of player GM
Right.
synchronicity.
Right.
Honestly,
Right.
I'm gonna get goosebumps when I tell this story. So she said, "I don't want to know why. That's all you." And I said, "Okay." And so her curse was just bad luck. And she would let me do that however I wanted. I would occasionally make her roll something with disadvantage, or something would happen narratively that would give her bad luck. I devised a story because I knew this player. She's wonderful, and she really likes stories about strong women and sort of empowering women. And so I
Mhm.
knew that she would love this story. So what I devised for her was that a story where she could empower women in pain.
Mm.
This is not a story for everybody, and I admit that, but it was about the suffering of women. So what I devised for her was that every woman in her line all the way down had been cursed, and she didn't know why. And uh and as I was developing that story and she was finding out that her aunt had been cursed, okay, and so was her cousin, and okay, all of these female family members have been cursed. She was very invested. Anytime I gave her a story where a woman was in trouble, she dived right in. She did
Mhm,
exactly what
mhm.
I knew she would do, and she did it better than I thought she would. Every time there was a story where a woman was being hurt, a woman needed help, a woman needed tenderness and caring, she dived right in, and she invested herself in those moments of role play and connection and building that community. And so over these 2 years, as we built this campaign together, um, and it got to the reveal of where she got this blood curse, it was perfect. I revealed the big bad. Let me see how I can tell you this story without summarizing my whole campaign. The big bad he is an ex-god tossed out of the pantheon. He had had a child with a human woman, and he had called that child Vaster's daughter of war, and he had used her to try to win the war against the pantheon.
Mhm.
And when Vasterus betrayed him and sealed him away the first time, he cursed the human woman that he bore her with and said, "You are the reason that I have been defeated, and I'm going to curse you and everyone who comes through your line because you
Right.
did this to me."
Yeah.
And so when she saw that vision, it was I mean, we were crying, all of us
Nice.
at the table, because she saw this woman's face and all of the women who have suffered because of that moment. And that only worked as well as it did because she, for 2 years, anytime she saw a woman in trouble,
Right.
she threw
Right.
herself into helping.
Right.
And that's
Oh,
what I
that's
mean
fantastic.
about, yeah, like when you have two people who are building a theme together, it honestly ends up so much better. She just went like, "This is what this has been building to." And I was like, "I know, I didn't even know it would turn out this good. I didn't know." Like, it's one of my favorite moments from that campaign, honestly.
Wow. No, that sounds great. You've clearly had some amazing role playing experiences. Hey, we got one other question that came up
Yeah.
from our social media probes. What is your favorite game product that you've worked on?
Gosh.
I'm going to add
Gosh.
and why, I guess.
And
Just
why?
just to
So
veer it off of a one sentence answer.
I I might
By the
cheat.
way, you have the astronomancer says you have such fantasy stories, fantastic stories, I guess, from your games. Great players. So
They're
yeah,
amazing.
it's coming across.
I'm gonna actually cheat the question a little bit, and that's the
Yeah, sure.
project that Amber and
It's
I
like
are.
PR media training. If you don't like the question, just bridge
Yeah.
to the one you really want to answer, right?
Yeah, I really liked working on Deathless Skies of Sire with Amber just because we work so well together. But one of the I'm really enjoying right now working on. I'll give you a sneak preview.
Please,
We're
yes.
in the very beginning stages. But we are Amber and I want to make our own TTRPG, and we want to base it off of some of the themes that have come up in my work a lot through Eyes Unclouded, through the Adventurer's Domestic Handbook, and even through other things that I've done. But anyway, what we want to do is create a kind of a post-apocalyptic TTRPG that is focused more on healing and community and rebuilding more than it is on the trauma and the pain. Um, we want to make a TTRPG that is about healing and exploring a broken world that is putting itself back together rather than a
Mm-hmm.
world that is breaking.
Right,
It's
right.
very like Breath of the Wild. You know how have you played Breath of the Wild?
No, I haven't.
You and your real RPGs. Okay. Breath of the Wild is
Is that
about
by TSR Wizards?
it's a
It's a Palladium. Who
yeah.
published it?
Yeah. I'm pretty sure it was Pathfinder. No.
Paizo. Oh, it's a Paizo game. Okay, got
Yeah.
it. I'm with you.
No. So no, but it's a game in the Legend of Zelda series, and it's about a world that was destroyed by a cataclysmic event.
Right.
But when you go around the world and you're trying to stop that threat from rising again and destroying the world a second time, but these people aren't suffering. They're not, I mean, they are in some ways, but they're not, it's not a story of doom and gloom. And what we want to try to achieve that Breath of the Wild didn't really do is you have the Rudo community, and you have the Zora community, and you have the Goron community, and they're doing their things, right? You go in, you beat the divine beast, and you did it. Awesome. Okay, bye Zoras. I'm gonna go to the Gorons now. See ya. And you might go back there sometimes, but what we want to do is make a game in which part of the goal is to connect these communities. You have these fragmented pieces of society, and in your actions of saving the world and helping heal it, you're connecting these communities and helping patch together back this fragmented world. And we want there to be, I mean, we're in the very, very, very beginning stages, but we want there to be, you know, like Legend of Zelda has like cooking as a thing that you do to get buffs and various things. So like, how can we tie that in? How can you
Right.
spend some time cooking? How can you capture that feeling of that mountain, that sun cresting over the mountain as peaceful piano music plays, and you're looking out at a devastated world, and you're knowing that it's on the path to healing and that you can help that.
Right.
And that has been so fun to just toss around with Amber, and to just knock ideas back and forth. And I think this is going to be my favorite thing I've ever worked on
That,
because it's
that
very
sounds
Sadie.
that sounds great, and it sounds like something that we could use today.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
think so. I
Yeah.
think it's
Yeah.
timely. I think it's timeless, but I think it's especially timely right now.
Right. So hey, there was a thread earlier in chat about hats. You, I've told you have a lot of hats. I said if you
Oh,
put on a hat, I'd put on a hat.
okay.
So
For
you got a demand for that.
Okay, 1 second. I'll be back.
Okay.
I'm getting a
Okay.
hat. I
Okay.
still have my
Okay.
headset on, so I can still hear you.
Okay. I'm gonna get my hat too. Oh,
Okay.
we're probably doing a big faux pas here. We didn't. Yeah.
We didn't talk about this. We didn't plan this ahead of time.
Yeah. Okay. This is all impromptu. You saw it here on
Yeah.
Fireside. All impromptu. You got your hat. Okay.
Okay.
No,
I
that's a
have.
head. That's the those are that's a headset. That's not a hat. Oh, okay, okay, okay. The hat's coming.
Okay. I'm not going to be able to hear you while I put these hats on for you.
Okay, that's
Just
okay.
so you
That's
know.
okay. All right, good. Oh, that's a lovely hat. That's a good hat. Yes, nice, nice. I'm doing the thumbs up because she can't hear me right now. That's nice too. Okay, that's good. Okay, yeah, nice. Oh, those are good. Nice. Very nice. Yeah, yeah. Okay. So I I
There's
I
almost
I promised I'd put on one too. So here we go.
Yes! Yes! I love it!
This is my costume for my gnome fighter. His name is Ferret Pickle McFickle, and he's his main characteristic is he's eager. He's always ready to go into. Let's go. Let's
Yeah.
go. Let's go.
Your cats are cooler than mine. Oh man. Look, I can probably keep it on over
You
my
got real
headset.
hats. I have joke hat. There we go. Oh,
I
that's
could,
great.
yeah, I
There you
could
go.
keep it on over my headset.
Fantastic. Oh, hey, Sadie, I'm going to ask you one parting question. You can keep your hat on if you like.
Excellent.
This is our final
What do you
question.
mean our
So
hour's already up?
I know it's already up. Yes. Okay. So the question I have for you to kind of end this is, you're a writer for Dungeons and Dragons, and Dungeons and Dragons has been around a long time, and a lot of people worked on Dungeons and Dragons over the decades. So what do you hope to bring to Dungeons and Dragons as a writer for this amazing game, which I
Yeah.
honestly say Dungeons and Dragons and Magic the Gathering are the two best games ever made in the history of the world. So
Yeah. So I think we've touched on this a little bit. I want to bring heroic moments. I've quoted this before, but so I have a two-part answer. My husband, when back when COVID, a few months after COVID started, and kind of in the throes of quarantine, and all these horrible world events were happening, and I remember telling him, it's really hard to feel like anything I'm doing right now matters. I am an editor, I am a writer, I am an artist, I am all these things, and they felt so insignificant to me right then. I'm a DM, like I'm so many things, but I said it's hard to feel like anything I'm doing matters. And he said, you are giving people an avenue to feel brave in a time when it is very, very, very hard to feel brave. And I think that's one of the most beautiful things you can do.
hmm.
And I've really taken that to heart. I think that giving people moments to feel heroic and brave and powerful is one of my one of my um
Oh, she's getting serious. She's taking off the
yeah,
hat. That means
yeah.
she's serious. Yeah, yeah.
It's one of my biggest goals, is to provide avenues for that. I want to show people that I want to teach help I want to give others the tools to know that this can be one of the best activities you do with your friends in your life, that when you get together and you tell these stories. I'm a big believer in that D&D, people talk about how it has primarily combat mechanics, and they're right, but I think that's because the majority of social and exploration comes from the table, and it comes from who you choose to share that table with. And when you
Yeah. It's a good point.
when you trust your players and when they trust you, you can build a game that brings more home and love and hearth and
Yeah.
love to their lives, just by virtue of being there to tell stories with them every week. And I want to prove that you can tell a story that is half killing monsters and half growing and becoming better and growing closer and supporting others and being with them. It does
Absolutely.
That's what I want,
Yeah. Well,
is
Sadie, I
that
think you're on the
journey.
right track. I think you have that within your grasp.
I'm
I
working
do.
on it. I'm
You
really
are.
trying,
You're
Peter.
doing good. You're doing great. Thank you so much for being on our show today. It was great to have you to have this time together and to learn more about your thoughts on design and Dungeons and Dragons. And I appreciate you coming in.
I really appreciate you having me. This has been a fun chat.
All right. Well, thank you for joining us. That wraps up another episode of Fireside with Peter Adkison here on Gen Con TV. My guest next week will be Rich Lescafleur. In the meantime, we have lots of other programming between now and then here on Gen Con TV. On Friday at 2 p.m., join Bonsai and Emma and Derek and Isabella Von Gould for our tabletop news show takes. On Monday next week at 6 p.m. Pacific, join us for Board Games with the Brothers Murph. And on Wednesday, a week from today, at 1:30 Pacific, Board Games with This Game Gets Dicey. And then at 4 p.m. Pacific, we're back to Fireside with me and our guest, Rich. Excuse me. I was doing so well until just this moment. If you, also, if you miss any of our shows, you can find all our streams about a day or so later on the Gen Con video channel of YouTube, and including all the episodes that I did with Magic the Gathering and Dungeons and Dragons, people I've worked with back in the 90s. Also, if you want to connect with other Gen Con fans, please join the Gen Con Discord server that we have up. So please remember to follow, subscribe, turn on your notifications, tell your friends. Yeah, and so once again, thanks to our guest, Sadie Lowry, our studio managers, Marcus Mays, our producer, Derek Gooder, to the Dungeon Masters Guild for introducing us to new voices in Dungeons and Dragons, to Gen Con TV for hosting us, and most of all, thank you for watching.